Joining me now to help break down the top stories of the week is the Australian's Nick Cater. Nick, we'll start with your thoughts on Julian Leese's attacks against Peter Dutton this week.
Well, look, I'm puzzled, really. I mean, I count Julian as a good friend, and I admire him an awful lot. I just don't know why he hasn't been able to recognise that a bad voice is worse than having a voice. You know, basically, if the voice gets so bad that we cannot accept it, why not just say so? So look, I don't want to have a go at him, Rita. I think he is a sincere guy. I just think in this case he's thoroughly mistaken. I think Peter Dutton has taken the only appropriate stance in rejecting the voice, and I think, as we know, the vast majority of Australians are with him. So it puzzles me. I think that's the best I could say. It puzzles me.
It puzzles me too, and it puzzles me why the Liberal Party put up with this sort of disunity. Labor would never put up with this sort of antics. You know, it's all well and good to be a broad church, but at some point you've got to realise you're part of a team. And this sort of destructive behaviour has been tolerated for far too long within the party. I want to ask your opinion also about the former ABC host turned Indigenous voice to Parliament activist Kerry O'Brien, who this week said the conduct of the No camp has been an open invitation to racists. Have a listen.
When I heard Peter Dutton accusing the Prime Minister of re-racialising Australia, it was the pot calling the kettle black. The truth is that it is precisely that kind of terminology that has been, I think, a part of the process of inviting the racists amongst us to come out and be heard.
These voice advocates are not learning from their error of their ways, are they? They are just continually pushing this notion that if you oppose the voice, then you're somehow racist or bigoted, which to me is borderline gaslighting. How can you be racist if you are opposing racial divisions and racial privilege being enshrined into the Constitution?
Well, look, calling people racist for not agreeing with you is a surest way to make sure they don't agree with you and then tell all their friends to take the same stance. It's counterproductive for the Yes campaign. But look, you know, Kerry O'Brien's been around since what, about 1880 or something. So he should know the history of this. He should know that in 1967, 90.7% of Australians voted in favour of a referendum that said there would be no racial discrimination against Aborigines. That was the meaning of the 1967 referendum. Every last vestige, and there were very few of them, of racial discrimination against Aborigines at an official level, there would be removed. This referendum is turning the tide and saying, no, we will give special rights to Aborigines, not just equal rights, but special rights. And that is the point at which Australians say, no special rights for anybody. This is Australia. Every citizen has equal respect, deserves equal respect, whether their ancestors have been on this land for 60,000 years or whether they've only just signed their citizenship statement 5 minutes ago. That's the point. And Kerry O'Brien should get his head around this, that Peter Dutton is absolutely right. We are re-racialising the Constitution.
It seems the Yes camp is getting increasingly desperate, and in that desperation, they're making some ill-judged remarks. You're seeing this from multiple activists, politicians, all sorts of people who really should know better. Now, moving along to a different issue, we've got the Liddell coal-fired power station in New South Wales closing down, and that closure is going to do exactly what we told you was going to do. It's going to make energy more expensive, and that's now been confirmed, not just by your bills, but by a report from the Australian Energy Regulator. No one should be surprised by this, Nick, that if you restrict the supply of cheap, reliable energy, then, of course, prices will go up.
Well, you're asking the wrong person. I'm not an ordinary person on this. I'm an energy nerd. So I follow this stuff very closely. I have this addiction to going on the AEMO website at least 5 times a day. So I know what's happening, and that is that, until Liddell closed, New South Wales was ticking over quite nicely. We had about a gigawatt of power consistently from Liddell Power Station. Liddell closed. Now, if you look on it, there's consistently a gigawatt short in New South Wales, and they're having to beg and borrow energy from Queensland and, on rare occasions, goodness help us, from Victoria. So it's quite obvious if there's a shortage of supply, the price goes up. That's just the way of the world. So I just don't know why this is such a surprise to the Australian energy market operator. I would have thought they'd have got that.
Well, it's what they teach you in Economics 101, the laws of supply and demand. This is pretty simple stuff. So the fact that the policymakers couldn't wrap their heads around this is a big worry. Finally, to Victoria and the already stretched and understaffed state ambulance service was called to an emergency in Templestowe earlier this month. A child was having a seizure, or so they thought. It turns out it was a puppy. It was a dog, Nick. And the Victorian Ambulance Union is not happy about these nuisance calls. They say they've had 000 calls from people requesting a lift home after a night out, people who've been scratched by their cat. Do we need some sort of a public education campaign for Victorians not to call 000 unless it's an emergency, Nick?
The real question is, how is the dog? Did it recover? Nobody's told me that. I couldn't glean that from the story. But the point is this, that they have terrible problems with the ambulance service in Victoria, as you know. They've got ramping problems. People are left waiting 18 hours or longer for an ambulance to arrive. But it all comes down in the end, I'm convinced of this, Rita, to just organisation. It's not money. I think if you manage to persuade the head of Amazon to come in and manage the Victorian ambulance service for a fortnight, you'd see an enormous improvement in the service. It's just about doing things efficiently and stopping, idiocy like this, with ambulances going off to chase.
Well, Nick, nothing is working too well down here, so we should not be surprised. Nick Cater, thank you for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Rita.